My name is Chetan Arora, and I work with Nagarro. How many of you have heard of Nagarro? Good, thank you. And I am responsible for the Agile COE at Nagarro. And so I'll give you a quick introduction of my Agile journey. So this is about 10 or 12 years ago when I was working for an American multinational. And I was working for a team of about 30 odd people, and I was the module leader, so I was leading a team of about 10 to 12 people. And we were doing a project for a large multinational company. We were doing a pilot project. If that was successful, we would replicate that project across multiple locations. Yeah. And the first time my director met me, he said, "We really need this project to go, right?" I said, "Yeah, for sure, every project should go." He said, No, you don't understand. My promotion depends on it." So we did whatever we could. We worked Fridays, late evening. We worked Saturdays, we worked Sundays. There were times when I would go to the floor of my team and tell them, on a Friday evening saying, "Guys, I'm sorry, but we got to do it again. Saturday, Sunday working." Okay? And this went on for months, right? And that was the first time I was working on an Agile project. Right? And I was aware that, I read the manifesto and I was aware that IT people have brought up the Agile manifesto. And I was thinking to myself, how can IT people do this to IT people? How can they stab them at the back? But then, of course, after a couple of months, the project went live. I quit. A lot of my colleagues quit. And the director got a promotion. So, but then that really sort of intrigued my curiosity about agility, right? And is that really agile? Do I really want to do agile if that's what agility is about? Yeah, working 7 days a week for months thereon. Of course, then I realized the concept of sustainable pace, right? And all of that. All right, so my topic for today is organization structures for the agile age, right? I'm not going to talk about Scrum per se, but I'll take a step back and I'll tell you how. All right, so we're going to talk about people being engaged at work, right? The happiness factor, the happiness quotient. We'll talk about how we got where we are today, right? And I'll explain in a bit. And then we'll go on to talk about the way forward, okay? Maybe most of it is not making sense, but I'll explain. All right, with a show of hands, how many of you you love your work and the work environment? Show of hands. Okay. Can you guys keep your hands up for those of you who said yes? Do you feel valued at work and believe your organization provides the right environment to make a positive change? For those who continue to agree, keep your hands up. Others, please put your hand down. Would you voluntarily spend extra hours at work? Now, I'm talking about people in the corporate world, not freelancers, not agile consultants. Yeah, that's cheating, okay? Yeah. Even if you wanted to, would you be able to expend extra hours? Do you actually have the bandwidth to put in extra hours? Not bad. All right. So that's about, I'd say, 8%, 10%, yeah? All right. Thank you. You can put your hands down. So a couple of years ago, Gallup is an organization that is famed for doing a lot of research, especially around, they do a lot of polling, and they do it pretty well. So what do you think that figure was? How many people worldwide? So they did this survey a couple of years ago, I think about 126 countries. What do you think the result was? How many % of people feel engaged at work? So I gave you a hint when I said how many people have? 5%? Yeah, so it's slightly better than that, right? And that's a disaster. 13%. Right? But then why do people need to be engaged? Right? If I was maybe a manager, I couldn't care too much about engagement. Why should I care about engagement? Right? Because the study went on to find that it directly translates into higher profitability, right? It directly translates into higher customer ratings, and there's a lot more. Right? So even if you don't look at the moral aspects, the concept of being happy, there is a solid reason for corporates to stand up and take notice. Yeah? But how did we get to where we are today? How did we get into the organization structure that all of us have, right? We all have, CEO, then the next level, and so on and so on. Yeah? Any of you familiar with this gentleman? Yeah? Excellent. So this person is credited with being one of the first management consultants in the world. Okay? He was a mechanical engineer in the US. And in the year 1900, there was this exhibition like a world fair in France. Yeah? And what he did is he put up, so he was actually working with factories. He was consulting for factories. So what he did in the year 1900 is he set up a small camp just outside the Paris exposition, and he brought with him the same set of tools and the same set of people who would work back in his factory. Of course, a small setup, not an entire factory, but a small setup, right? Usually at that time, in factories, the normal norm was that the factory would produce about 9 feet of steel per minute. Yeah, 9 feet of steel, okay? Thanks to the way he was doing things, 50 feet. Okay? And understandably, there was a huge line of people right outside his tent, waiting to get in and understand what is he doing differently. Okay? So if you were a factory owner, any businessman, you would take serious notice of this gentleman. All right? So what was he doing that was different? So gentleman there, you aware of this person? Do you remember what he was doing different? Yeah, we'll come to that. We'll come to that. So what was different? There's something different he was doing, right? In fact, what he was doing was he was studying every single thing that was going on in his factory, right? Things like what? Right? And this may sound pretty normal today, but we are talking about 1900, right? Where there was no concept of efficiency and productivity and things like that, right? So essentially, he said, not a single second of slack, 100% utilization. Yeah? And now managers oversaw and instructed every single thing that went on. Okay? And there are many, many examples of his success, right? He got many awards. So there was a time when he was challenged that the art of pulping and drying could not be improved. And he took it up as a challenge. He brought down the cost of manufacturing pulp right down from $75 to $35 and the labor cost from $30 to $8, right? So the point I'm trying to make is anybody would take notice of this gentleman, right? And then of course he went on to say, so these were his primary tenets of efficiency, productivity, of how things should be done. Absolutely rigid and inflexible standards throughout your establishment, right? Maybe you guys can relate a little bit as to what goes on in establishments today. And that each employee of your organization should receive clear-cut, definitive instructions. The last part there is pretty interesting. These instructions should be exactly carried out whether they are right or wrong. Please follow instructions. And what is the result of that? Management or scientific management as we know today was born for the first time. Yeah? We started believing that there is only one single way, and that is the best way to do everything. Right? Especially applicable to manufacturing, but it percolated its way into the corporate world as well. Workers are mindless cogs in a larger machine, right? Tell them exactly what they do and they'll do it. Yeah? And then the role of the manager, right? So the manager does the thinking, not you. You got to do what has been told to you. Yeah? And what did we end up with? Something like this. Right? Now, I'm not saying all of this applies to your organization, but I'm sure at least some of it does. Agree? Does everybody see at least some of this in your organization? right? So the question is, if we moved on in technology, we've moved on in all spheres of life, why does our organization have to be like this? Isn't there an alternative? Right? And the good news is that there are already hundreds of companies who have found a better way. Okay? And of all places, like it is true in a lot of cases, they drew inspiration from nature. Right? What is this? It's a flock of birds. Right? Flying in the air. And how many of them actually collide and sort of fall to the ground? And is there a commander or a god, a CEO overseeing all of this? And another one. Ants. And another one. The human body. Cells inside. Yeah? And another one. Bee colony. All of them self-managed, self-organized without a single central leader. Okay? So these people who are, of course, in the forefront of research and have actually implemented these newer structures in the organization, what they found was that the new organization should be based on three primary pillars. Right? The first one, of course, is self-management, and we all understand that, right? We are all knowledgeable, we understand Agile and Scrum and all of that. The second one is the feeling of wholeness. You can be yourself in your organization. You don't have to be fearful of what you say or think. You don't have to think twice before expressing your ideas. You will not be shot down. People will respect you for what you are. Yeah? And the third is actually having a real purpose to what you do, to what your organization does. I mean, how many of us remember the mission statement of our company, and how many of us are actually aligned to it? Right? Some people even have a mission statement of, maybe highest profitability, for example, right? But is that why human beings exist? Is that our only purpose in life? Right? So these people who are doing research in this area and have actually implemented these practices in real life, according to them, these are the three foundations of the new age organization. So I'm going to pick up an example of the Netherlands, again going back many, many years. So earlier, probably 1950s, 1960s, there's this concept of a nurse who is in charge of an area, and she would have good relationships with the people there, and she would actually take care of people, right? So she would fulfill the nursing need, he or she would fulfill the nursing needs of people in that area, right? And the nurse, of course, would collaborate closely with the doctor and the hospitals and so on, right? But before long, the health insurance system realized that there could be efficiencies at scale. Yeah, so what did they do? They got all the nurses together, grouped them up, right? They formed small organizations. Not enough, right? We've got to scale further because it'll be even more efficient, right? So what do? They scale up even further, right? So there are roughly 250 companies, they got it down to 890 companies. What was the consequence, do you think? So earlier, the nurses had a personal relationship with their patients, right? They would go in, they would talk to them, they would not only take care of the medical needs, but of their social needs as well, right? So they would probably call the neighbor, say, this person is not well, can you take care of her, and so on. Yeah? But once it was an organization, the specialists got in, right? They were looking for efficiency. How did they achieve it? They started a call center. There were specialists who decided the schedule for the nurses. Which nurse is going to go in which area? How much time he or she is going to spend there, right? How much time each procedure is going to take. For example, for an injection, 10 minutes flat. If you need to give a bath to patients, 15 minutes. What do you think happened? Just like everything else, it got commoditized, right? It's just a commodity. And that's what's happening in a lot of our hospitals, right? So sooner or later, this is what the health system ended up with, right? That's what it was. All right, so, and these are some of the statements that the nurses came up with, right, when they were accustomed or when they were aligned to this new system of working, right? So all they had time was, so they were given time, they had to rush in, do whatever, one or two things they had to, and then they had to rush out, right? In a lot of cases, there were different nurses coming for different procedures, and the patients couldn't understand why. In some cases, the nurses were late, right? And the probably final nail in the coffin probably was when the nurses were asked to sell products that the organizations were now manufacturing, right? So they were asked, okay, from our pharmacy, recommend these set of products, right? So natural consequence, people started leaving, right? Because they thought the whole idea of serving people was compromised, right? They felt really, really bad about it. So one gentleman who was also a nurse in the year 2006 decided to do something about it. So obviously he quit as a nurse and he started his own company. Any of you familiar with this gentleman? Okay. So in 2006 he started with 10 people. And of course today it's the largest nursing organization in the Netherlands, right? For 7,000 a couple of years ago, today it's 10,000 plus nurses in his organization. So how did he do it? What is different about Bert's.org versus all the others? So a couple of things. Small teams, 10 to 12 people, right? These guys are in charge of everything, right from looking at how many people they want to visit in a day, to who's going to visit whom, right? What time? They plan their own vacations, right? So there is no manager you got to go to saying, please approve my leaves. And says, no, there's too much. You cannot. There's too much going on. They decide which hospitals they want to connect with, which pharmacies they should tell their patients to go to, right? And they also monitor their own performance. Okay, now some of this may sound ridiculous, but this is not a fictional company. It exists and it's doing really, really well. In fact, it's so successful that they're trying to replicate it in other European countries, for example, in the UK. No leader within the team. Unthinkable of in our organizations, right? No leader. Okay, and the second last point is particularly important because it gives you a strong sense of meaning, right? When you're looking at patients, you're forming deep relationships with them. And of course, they went back to the primary reason why they were nurses, to make that emotional and spiritual connect with the people, right? So this is what the structure of Bert's.org looks like. They have about, a couple of hundred teams now. So it's all flat, right? All the teams are at the same level. They have a coach. Now this is not an agile coach, but and the coach is not, he or she does not have any decision-making powers, right? So if the teams are struggling, what they would do is maybe reach out to their teams in different areas to find a solution. If not, they could get a coach in, but the coach would probably just try and give them the options and the team makes, the best choice, right? And they do all of it themselves, right? They even do things like hiring, right? They decide if there is more demand and they actually need additional persons in their team, right? And then they go ahead and hire. And by the way, believe it or not, 10,000 people, all distributed into teams, 10,000 nurses rather. And do you know how many people they have in support functions? For example, HR, finance, legal, and so on. Take a guess. 100, 200, 300, 1,000? Absolutely. So it's not 0, it's 30, right? And that's it, for 10,000 people. Yeah? Because one of the things that happens is when we bring in specialists, it's incumbent upon them to make themselves valuable, right? So they will put in processes, right? They will do things that sort of, show that they're adding value to the whole system, right? And the challenge that was happening in the previous case in the Netherlands nursing industry was that when they got in these experts, the decisions on the ground were not made by the nurses who were visiting these houses. It was made by somebody sitting in some office somewhere who all they cared about was efficiency, yeah, and not about relationships and all of that. Right. So does this really work? So E&Y did a study on this company, and they found that even though nurses went to these houses, spent time with the patients, had tea, had coffee, had nice gossip, they were still spending 4% less of hours per client. Right? Patients stay in care for only half as long, and a third of emergency cases were avoided. Okay, and take a look at the savings for the Netherlands healthcare system, 2 billion euros. Right? Now, the first time I came across this company, I thought maybe it's a one-off, and it's just the nursing industry, and maybe it'll not work in the other spheres of industry. But surprisingly, the list just goes on. Yeah, Zappos, you guys may have heard of. It's really, really famous for the way they run their company. Right? Again, they don't believe in. Of course, they do have leaders, but it's pretty flat, and it runs very, very similar to Birdsong. Right. I think that's what I had for today. Any questions? Yeah. Absolutely, yes. So if you guys want to read more about this, there are two areas to look for. One is TEAL organizations, TEAL. The other is holacracy. Right? Both of them are in the same area. They're two very, very similar approaches to, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I think there is one group of corporate rebels.
Yeah.
They are just assessing the companies, going to the company,
right,
and see what exactly is happening.
Yes, yes.
But he himself is telling that self-organization and also like wholeness and purpose.
Yeah.
But people can't achieve all the things in the organization. They just went there and analyze the situation.
Yeah.
They are not seeing the things actually different.
Excellent. Awesome. So this, absolutely, I get your point. So yeah, I got your point, sir. Thank you. Let me put this in context of Agile and Scrum. So one of the rules, or one of the guidance principles of Agile is self-organizing teams. Right? You do stuff on your own. You got, you just given a broad framework, and you got to do it in the way you can do it best. And nobody is supposed to hand out work to the team, saying, you there, you're going to do this. You give it to me by tomorrow. You there, you're going to work on this. You're supposed to do it on your own. Right? But try doing that to a team which has always worked in a command and control fashion. What do you think is going to happen? Will it happen overnight? Right? So there are some fundamental assumptions that we need to make for these kinds of processes and practices and structures to be put in place. First of all, the team members have to be motivated. They really need to enjoy what they're doing, right? It reminds me of that Naukri ad, where somebody's, bashing clothes, and he's, they say, oh, is it monster? He's stuck in the wrong job, right? So if you're stuck in the wrong job, there's no passion, right? You do whatever you want, have whatever structure you want, you're not going to be happy. So that doesn't apply here, right? So the premise is that you really enjoy what you do, but you don't have the environment to thrive in it. Okay, so for sure, these structures will fail. It's not a panacea, it's not going to work everywhere. So you need those basic prerequisites for it to work.
This is like kind of ideal because he himself, the Frederick himself agrees that people it's very difficult to follow this thing.
Just as it is difficult to be, I don't know, maybe honest or, yeah, it's a challenge, of course. I mean, there are challenges here as well. However, like the E&Y study said, right, you have clear benefits. Of course, I mean, what about the fact that all of us, it makes people happier, right? Again, assuming that you're on the right line and so on, right? Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
There are other concepts that we talk about on a daily basis.
Yep.
Which are actually visible. sharing of work items for the other. Amazing piece. Thanks for sharing.
Welcome. All right.
And I think people are evolving
Yeah.
from 1900s to now.
Absolutely. That's yeah.
So they are now need not power and control.
Yeah. I mean, the first time I saw it, why does an organization structure have to be the way it is? Just because it's always been like that. And there's no other reason, right? Because we, as humans, probably have not spent a lot of time thinking about it. And now you have people who've done exactly that. Yeah.
They need more autonomy, like my kids. They're autonomous. They don't want to get autonomy.
Yeah, that's a touchy topic. I got 2 kids and yeah. So, again, I'm not a visionary and I don't claim to be one, but what I think is that in the course of the next 5, 10, 15 years, of course, maybe some of us would have retired by then, but we will see a lot more of these organizations coming.